Hey guys, tonight we are not exploring pyramids in the desert or sailing vast oceans. No. Tonight you are stepping right into the heart of the Aztec Empire, to the bustling capital city of Tenochtitlan, just before the arrival of the Europeans in the early 16th century. You're walking through a market, perhaps the famous Tlatelolco market, surrounded by the sounds and smells of a vibrant civilization at its height. You see colorful fruits piled high, rich spices filling the air with their aromas, earthy vegetables laid out in neat rows, the sizzle of food cooking on small braziers. And as you take in this sensory feast, you might wonder, what did their food truly taste like? We know they had intense flavors from chili peppers, the earthy bitterness of cacao, the staple goodness of maize corn. But what about sweet? It might surprise you to learn that the dominant sweetener we use today, refined cane sugar, was completely unknown here. Sugarcane was not native to the Americas. The Aztec world, and Mesoamerica as a whole, had its own distinct sources of sweetness, its own forgotten flavors derived from native plants and insects. You probably won't survive this history lesson without feeling a strange craving for something sweet, and perhaps a little bewildered by the idea of a world without readily available sugar. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the midst of the market, the air filled with 1,000 different scents. The earthy smell of maize dough, the sharp aroma of chili, the distinct fragrance of various fruits, the smoke from cooking fires, the distant smell of the lake. The sounds are a constant, lively hum voices speaking Nahuatl, the lingua franca of the empire, the cries of vendors, the rustle of woven baskets, the movement of people. It's a vibrant, sensory-rich environment, showcasing the incredible diversity of foods available in the Aztec world. The Aztec diet was remarkably varied and sophisticated, based on intensive agriculture, hunting, fishing, and extensive trade networks that brought goods from all corners of the empire and beyond to markets like Tlatelolco. Maize, beans, and squash formed the agricultural trinity, supplemented by tomatoes, chilies, avocados, various fruits, and protein sources like turkeys, ducks, deer, fish, and insects. The Aztec diet was highly diverse and complex, based on intensive agriculture, hunting, fishing, and extensive trade, and included a variety of sources of sweetness derived from native plants and insects, as sugarcane was not indigenous to the Americas prior to the arrival of Europeans. This is our mainstream historical fact, setting the stage for their unique sweet palate. Crucially, the sweetness in their diet came from sources native to the Americas. Sugarcane and the refined sugar produced from it was introduced by Europeans after contact. So the Aztec world had a different sweet landscape, one without the intense, crystalline, ubiquitous sweetness of modern sugar. Their sweeteners offered a variety of sweet flavors, each with its own characteristics, textures, and uses. The primary sources of sweetness you would find included products from the maguey plant, a type of agave, various forms of honey from native bees, and the natural sweetness of numerous native fruits. Each provided a distinct type of sweetness. Different from each other and different from cane sugar, sweetness played a role in Aztec cuisine, but perhaps a different role than it does in many modern diets. While sweet foods and drinks existed, they often featured alongside other strong flavors. Sweeteners might be used to balance the bitterness of cacao in drinks, to add flavor to maize-based dishes like tamales or porridges, or enjoyed in the form of fresh or processed fruits. Sweet substances also held significant cultural and ceremonial importance, used as offerings to the gods or included in ritual drinks. You might see vendors selling vibrant fruits you don't recognize, prickly pear cactus fruits, nopals, sweet potatoes, camotes, mamey sapotes, or various types of berries. You'd smell the distinct aroma of products made from maguey. The air might buzz with the scent of different kinds of honey. A quirky tidbit about Aztec flavors involves their combination of sweetness with other tastes in ways that might seem unusual to us. While sweet desserts existed, sweeteners were often used in savory or bitter contexts. Cacao drinks, now for instance, were often bitter and unsweetened, or only lightly sweetened, and might include chilies or spices. Sweeteners were sometimes incorporated into maize dishes, adding a subtle sweetness rather than dominating the flavor profile. Imagine a tamale with a sweet filling, or a drink combining chocolate, chili, and honey. There's joke number one. Yes, I'd like the chili chocolate drink. Lightly sweetened with cactus syrup sounds. Adventurous. Historians debate the overall prevalence and social accessibility of sweet flavors in the ancient Aztec diet compared to the more dominant flavors of chili, maize, or cacao. Was sweetness a flavor profile primarily reserved for the elite or used mainly in religious ceremonies and offerings? Or were sweeteners like maguey syrup and certain fruits accessible enough to be a relatively common taste experience for the general population, perhaps used more sparingly or in less refined forms? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand how central sweetness was to the everyday Aztec palate. Stepping into this Aztec market, you're experiencing a world of flavors shaped by local resources and cultural preferences. A palate that hadn't yet encountered the intense, pure sweetness that would arrive with sugar. Joke number two. You look at a vendor selling maguey syrup. Looks sweet. Probably not shove it in everything including your coffee sweet. Though, their sweeteners were diverse, each with its own story, cultivation, and use. Joke number three. You imagine asking for sugar in this market. Sugar is that a type of particularly sweet mud. This glimpse into the Aztec sweet world before sugar sets the stage to explore those specific forgotten sweeteners, how they were produced, and how they were traded in the bustling markets of the empire, revealing a different history of sweetness than the one sugar would later dominate. The Aztec world had a diverse palette of sweet flavors from native sources, a different kind of sweetness than our sugar-dominated one, derived from plants and insects. But how did these various sweeteners, some gathered locally, others brought from distant parts of the empire, reach the vast population of the capital city? Tenochtitlan, situated on its island in Lake Texcoco. They converged at a place famous throughout Mesoamerica, a place where everything seemed to be for sale, a microcosm of the empire's reach and organization, the bustling market of Tlatelolco. Tlatelolco was originally a separate city-state, but it was conquered by Tenochtitlan and became its twin city, seamlessly integrated physically and economically. The market was located just north of the main ceremonial center of Tenochtitlan, a vast open plaza that on market days would become an explosion of commerce and human activity. Descriptions from the Spanish conquerors who witnessed it are full of awe at its scale and organization, often comparing it favorably to the markets of Europe at the time. Imagine it a massive open square, perhaps 20 or 25 acres in size, filled with tens of thousands of people on the busiest market days which occurred every 5 or 20 days, depending on the scale. The air is thick with 1,000 different smells. The earthy scent of maize, the sharp, sometimes overwhelming aroma of different chili peppers, the fragrance of flowers and herbs, the distinct smells of various foods cooking on small braziers, the smell of animals, turkeys, dogs, and the ever-present smell of the nearby lake. Sensory details the overwhelming mix of scents hitting you as you enter, the visual spectacle of crowds and goods stretching in every direction, the constant loud hum of sound from thousands of voices, animal cries and activity, the feel of being jostled by the throng. The sounds are a constant din, the cries of vendors advertising their wares, buyers bartering, conversations happening in multiple languages and dialects from across the empire. Flutes and drums might play, adding to the lively atmosphere. It's a vibrant, noisy, energetic place, the economic heart of the empire pulsing with life. and the variety of goods available was simply astonishing. Everything imaginable in the Aztec world seemed to pass through Tlatelolco. Basic foodstuffs like maize, beans, squash, chilies, tomatoes, amaranth, chia. Prepared foods like tamales, tortillas, and stews. Luxury foods like cacao beans used as currency, vanilla, tropical fruits, and honey. Tools and weapons made of obsidian, flint, and copper. Cotton cloaks and other textiles. Raw cotton and dyes. Ceramics, basketry, and wood products. Live animals like turkeys, dogs, and various birds. Construction materials. Medicinal herbs and other plant products. Even more unusual items like human hair used for wig making. Perhaps gold dust in thin quills. Precious feathers. And jade or other gemstones. The market wasn't a chaotic free-for-all. It was highly organized, with different sections designated for specific types of goods. There was a section for pottery, a section for textiles, a section for live animals, a section for food items, and so on. This made it easier for buyers and sellers to find what they needed. Officials appointed by the market authority oversaw the trade, ensuring fair weights and measures and preventing theft or other dishonest practices. Judges sat in a building adjacent to the market, ready to resolve disputes quickly and on the spot. It was a sophisticated system of regulation for such a massive commercial hub. The market of Tlatelolco in Tenochtitlan was the central and largest market in the Aztec Empire, renowned for its immense size, hosting tens of thousands of people on major market days, its vast variety of goods traded from across Mesoamerica, and its sophisticated organization with designated sections for different commodities, and a system of officials and judges overseeing transactions and maintaining order. This is our mainstream historical fact, describing the scale and structure of the market. This organized chaos was a central point for the distribution of goods throughout the empire. Products from distant provinces, sent as tribute or brought by merchants, would arrive here and be traded. Wealth was accumulated through commerce. The market was also a significant social hub, a place for people from different parts of the empire and different social classes to interact, though perhaps in separate areas. It was also a vital source of information, with news and rumors spreading rapidly among the crowds of travelers and merchants. Among this astonishing variety of goods, the different native sources of sweetness would have had their place. Perhaps in the food section, the section for dried goods, or specific stalls dedicated to sweeteners, bringing these flavors from their sources to the city's population. A quirky tidbit about Tlatelolco comes from the detailed accounts of the Spanish conquistador Bernal Díaz del Castillo, who marched with Cortés. He wrote extensively about the market, expressing his amazement. Among the things he noted for sale were human hair used for making wigs, as we know, and live insects like grasshoppers and maguey worms, which were roasted and eaten as delicacies. Imagine browse for sweeteners and seeing roasted insects for sale nearby. There's joke number 1. Sweeteners this way? Freshly roasted grasshoppers this way. Truly a one-stop shop for all your diverse culinary needs. Historians debate the peak daily attendance and precise scale of the Tlatelolco market, questioning the accuracy of the numbers reported by Spanish chroniclers, which sometimes reached figures as high as 60,000 or more on major market days. While undoubtedly massive, the exact size and how consistently its complex administrative system functioned in practice are still subjects of study. This is our open scholarly debate phrase, grappling with the details of just how big and well organized this incredible market truly was. Stepping into the Tlatelolco market today would be an overwhelming sensory experience, a dive into the vibrant heart of a powerful empire. Joke number 2. You try to navigate the crowds. Excuse me, is this the chili section? I seem to have taken a wrong turn at the feather cloaks. It was the destination for all the diverse products of the Aztec world, including the various forgotten sweeteners we are about to explore. Joke number 3. You look at the sheer volume of goods. Looks like they had everything here. Except, a comfortable pair of shoes for walking around this much. The Tlatelolco market was a bewildering, vibrant hub where goods from all corners of the Aztec Empire converged, a testament to their extensive trade networks. And among that astonishing variety, you would find the various native sources of sweetness that sweetened the Aztec diet before sugarcane's arrival. Perhaps the most important, the most versatile, the very backbone of Aztec sweetness came from a plant that was central to Mesoamerican life in countless ways, the maguey. The maguey plant, a type of agave, is a large, spiky succulent, instantly recognizable with its thick, fleshy leaves growing outwards from a central core, sometimes reaching impressive sizes. It thrived in the semi-arid regions of Mesoamerica and was one of the most important cultivated plants in the Aztec world, providing a remarkable array of products essential for daily life, only one of which was sweetness. From the maguey, the Aztecs derived not one, but two main forms of sweetness aguamiel: the fresh, sweet sap collected from the plant's core, and miel de maguey, a concentrated syrup made by boiling down that sap. Aguamiel, which translates roughly to honey water in Spanish, was the sweet liquid that accumulated in the heart of the maguey plant. To obtain it, cultivators would wait until the plant was nearing maturity, ready to send up its tall, flowering stalk. They would then cut out the center of the plant, creating a basin, and prevent the stalk from growing. The plant's energy, instead of producing flowers, one would channel into producing a large quantity of sweet sap that collected in this basin. This sap could be collected daily, often twice a day, for several months from a single plant before it was exhausted. Sensory details the visual of the cut maguey heart forming a basin, the smell of the fresh, slightly earthy sap, the taste of the aguamiel, mildly sweet, somewhat watery, perhaps with a faint grassy or earthy note. Aguamiel was primarily consumed as a fresh drink, providing hydration and some natural sugars. It was also the base for pulque, a mildly alcoholic, milky drink made by fermenting aguamiel. While pulque was a major product of the maguey, the unfermented or lightly fermented aguamiel also provided direct sweetness. The second and more concentrated form of sweetness was miel de maguey, or maguey syrup. This was produced by collecting large quantities of aguamiel and boiling it down in pots over a fire. The heat evaporated the water content, concentrating the natural sugars in the sap. The longer it was boiled, the thicker and sweeter the syrup became. The resulting miel de maguey was a viscous liquid, typically ranging in color from a light golden amber to a darker brown, depending on the boiling time. Its taste was distinctly sweet, but with an earthy, sometimes slightly smoky or mineral note, quite different from the floral sweetness of honey or the pure sweetness of cane sugar. Sensory details the smell of the sap boiling, becoming sweeter and more caramelized. The visual of the liquid thickening and darkening, the sticky feel of the syrup, the unique taste, sweet, earthy, with that distinct maguey character. Miel de maguey was a versatile sweetener, used in various foods and drinks. It could be used to sweeten porridges, tamales, or other maize-based dishes. It might be added to drinks beyond pulque, though perhaps less commonly used to sweeten the bitter cacao than honey. It provided a native source of concentrated sweetness for the Aztec diet, one that was relatively widely available in regions where maguey was cultivated. Maguey's importance went far beyond its sweet products. It was truly a multi-purpose plant, a symbol of sustenance and utility. Its tough fibers were used to make ropes, textiles, and sandals. Its sharp thorns served as needles or piercing tools. Its large leaves were used for thatching roofs, as a fuel for fires, as wrappers for cooking food like tamales, and when dried, even as a form of paper or scroll for writing and drawing. The base of the plant could be roasted and eaten. Imagine a single plant providing sweetness, drink, fiber, tools, fuel, packaging, and paper. Our quirky tidbit. The Aztec used the thorns of the maguey plant as needles, and sometimes they would leave a small piece of the maguey fiber attached to the thorn to create a pre-threaded needle, a simple but ingenious natural tool. There's joke number one. Need sweetness maguey, need rope. Maguey, need a pre-threaded needle. Believe it or not, Maguey. The maguey plant, various species of agave, was a vital and multi-purpose resource throughout ancient Mesoamerica. Cultivated extensively for numerous products including its sweet sap aguamiel, consumed fresh or fermented into pulque, and, crucially, boiled down to produce a concentrated syrup miel de maguey, which served as a primary source of native sweetness in the Aztec diet before the introduction of sugarcane. This is our mainstream historical fact, emphasizing the plant's importance and its sweet gifts. Maguey cultivation was particularly important in the highland regions. Sweeteners derived from maguey, especially the syrup, would be traded in markets like Tlatelolco, bringing this key sweet flavor from the growing regions to the urban center. Historians debate the relative importance and widespread accessibility of miel de maguey syrup versus honey as the most significant source of concentrated sweetness for the non-elite population in the Aztec Empire. While honey might have been more highly valued in some contexts, was maguey syrup, due to the plant's widespread cultivation, a more common and affordable sweetener for the average Aztec household compared to honey? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand which native sweetener truly dominated the everyday Aztec sweet palate. Maguey was a cornerstone of Aztec life and its sweet gifts. Aguamiel and miel de maguey were fundamental to their experience of sweetness. Joke number 2. You look at a maguey plant. So much potential, so much spikiness. It provided a distinct, earthy sweetness that was woven into their diet and culture. A key flavor in the forgotten sweet world before sugar. Joke number 3. You imagine trying to extract the sap? Just gotta reach past the very sharp spikes. I'm sure this will be fine. The maguey plant was a generous provider of sweetness in the Aztec world, yielding both fresh aguamiel and rich miel de maguey syrup. But these sweet gifts didn't just appear magically in bowls, they had to be harvested from the plant itself. A process requiring specific knowledge, skill, and daily effort. The first step, the collection of that sugary liquid from the plant's heart, was a fundamental part of the sweet supply chain. Aguamiel, the sweet sap, was the raw material for both the refreshing drink consumed fresh and the concentrated syrup used in cooking and sweetening. Getting to it required understanding the life cycle of the maguey plant. Cultivators would wait for the plant to mature, a process that could take many years, sometimes a decade or more. The crucial timing was just before the plant sent up its tall, central flowering stalk, known as the quiote. This stalk is a massive zhejiang storage of energy and sugars the plant has accumulated over its lifetime. Instead of letting the quiote grow, which would exhaust the plant and lead to its death after flowering, cultivators would cut out the central bud or stalk. This left a large, bowl-shaped cavity in the heart of the plant, where the quiote would have grown. The plant's energy, prevented from growing upwards, would then channel into producing a large quantity of sweet sap that collected in this cavity. Sensory details the sharp smell of the freshly cut maguey plant, the visual of the large, fleshy leaves surrounding the newly created basin, the feel of the cool, smooth surface of the cut plant tissue. The sweet sap, the aguamiel, would begin to collect in this basin. To extract it, harvesters used a specialized tool, often described as a long, hollow gourd or tube, known in Spanish as a tlachiquero. You would insert one end of the tlachiquero into the basin in the maguey plant's heart. Then, using suction, you would suck the sap up into the gourd or tube. Once full, you'd place a finger over the end or tilt it up to keep the sap inside. Then transfer the contents into a larger collection container, typically a large pot or a skin bag carried on your back. Sensory details the feel of the smooth tlachiquero in your hands, the subtle sound of suction as the liquid is drawn up, the visual of the pale, sometimes slightly bubbly sap collecting in the basin and filling the tlachiquero. The remarkable thing about the maguey plant is that once prepared this way, it doesn't give up all its sap at once. It continuously replenishes the aguamiel in the basin. Harvesters would typically visit the prepared plants frequently, often twice a day, in the morning and again in the evening, to collect the newly accumulated sap. A single maguey plant, prepared for sap collection, could produce aguamiel for several months, sometimes up to 6 months or even longer, yielding a significant amount of sweet liquid before its reserves were finally depleted and the plant died. This process required consistent, daily labor. Harvesters, often called tlachiqueros, named after their tool, would travel through the fields where maguey was cultivated, visiting each prepared plant morning and evening to collect the sap. It wasn't a one-time harvest. It was a constant rhythmic process of collection, requiring knowledge to know which plants were ready, how to prepare them correctly, and how to extract the sap efficiently. Joke number 1. Early morning commute mine involves walking through spiky fields with a giant straw. Don't forget your puncture-proof sandals. A quirky tidbit about aguamiel harvesting involves specific practices or beliefs associated with the tlachiquero tool itself, or rituals performed during collection. Some traditional accounts mention the tool being specifically made from a particular type of gourd or cane, sometimes perhaps decorated. There might have been specific prayers or small offerings made to the maguey plant before preparing it for sap collection, acknowledging its gift of sweetness and sustenance. Imagine a harvester singing a quiet song of thanks to the plant before beginning their work. There's joke number 2. This isn't just a giant straw, it's a sacred vessel of sweetness. And also, a straw. A really big straw. Aguamiel. The sweet sap from the core of the maguey plant was a vital resource harvested by cutting out the central flowering bud before it grew and collecting the liquid that accumulated in the resulting cavity. This process was typically performed manually twice daily, morning and evening, using a special sucking gourd or tube called a tlachiquero, providing a continuous supply of sweet liquid from a single plant for several months. This is our mainstream historical fact, detailing the ingenious harvesting method. Historians debate the social accessibility and economic organization of maguey cultivation and aguamiel harvesting. Was growing maguey and collecting aguamiel a practice common to most households where the plant could be cultivated, providing a household-level source of sweetness and drink? Or was it primarily a specialized skill and resource controlled by certain groups or regions, with the products then traded more widely? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand how broadly this knowledge and resource were distributed within Aztec society. Aguamiel harvesting was a skilled, labor-intensive daily process that provided the fundamental sweet liquid for the Aztec diet, a direct connection to the plant's generous gift. It was the crucial first step in bringing maguey sweetness from the fields to the market and the table. Joke number 3. You finish collecting from a plant, wiping your brow. All right, that's today's sweetness secured. Only 50 more plants to go before dinner. Ah, daily. The tlachiqueros collected the fresh, sweet aguamiel sap from the heart of the maguey plants, a vital source of hydration and mild sweetness. A gift from the spiky provider. But while aguamiel could certainly be drunk fresh, providing a gentle, natural sweetness, to create a more concentrated sweetener, something thicker, richer, and much easier to store and transport than the bulky liquid sap. A further step was needed: boiling. Creating miel de maguey syrup involved taking large quantities of the collected aguamiel and reducing it. You would pour the freshly harvested sap into pots, likely sturdy ceramic vessels designed for cooking over a fire. These pots would then be placed directly over or near a fire pit or brazier. The process was essentially one of slow, sustained heating. As the aguamiel heated, the water content in the sap would evaporate, leaving behind the natural sugars and other dissolved solids. The longer the liquid simmered over the fire, the more water would evaporate, and the more concentrated, thicker, and sweeter the remaining liquid would become. It wasn't a rapid boil like making a quick stew. It was a process of gradual reduction, often a slow simmer that could take hours, depending on the desired thickness and the volume of sap being processed. As the boiling progressed, you would visually see the changes happening. The initially pale, watery aguamiel would begin to thicken, its color gradually deepening from a light golden amber to a richer, darker brown as the sugars caramelize slightly from the heat. Small bubbles would rise to the surface, and the aroma of the sap would fill the air, becoming sweeter and more intense, developing those characteristic earthy or caramelized notes of maguey syrup. Sensory details the smell of the boiling sap, changing from fresh to sweeter and more caramel-like. The visual of the liquid simmering, thickening and darkening, the warmth radiating from the fire, the sound of gentle bubbling. Monitoring the boiling was important. Too high a heat could cause the syrup to scorch, giving it a burnt or bitter taste, or cause it to boil over, wasting precious product. You might need to stir the liquid periodically to ensure even heating and prevent sticking, particularly as it thickened. The goal was to achieve the desired consistency, thick enough to be a rich syrup, but not so thick that it crystallized or became hard when cooled. The result was miel de maguey syrup, a viscous, naturally sweet liquid that was significantly sweeter than the raw aguamiel sap. Its unique taste, that blend of sweetness with earthy or smoky undertones depending on the boiling, made it a distinct sweetener in the Aztec pantry. This boiling process was a crucial step in transforming the relatively bulky and perishable aguamiel into a more valuable, portable, and storable form of sweetness. Large volumes of sap could be reduced into a much smaller volume of concentrated syrup, making it easier to transport from the maguey fields to urban centers like Tenochtitlan, and easier to store for future use. Miel de maguey, a concentrated sweet syrup that served as a primary native sweetener in the Aztec diet, was produced by collecting large quantities of the aguamiel sap, harvested from the maguey plant, and boiling it down slowly in pots over a fire. This process of water evaporation concentrated the natural sugars, resulting in a thicker, significantly sweeter, and more storable sweetener. This is our mainstream historical fact, detailing the process of turning sap into syrup. A quirky tidbit about the production involves the potential for different qualities or consistencies of syrup, depending on the boiling time and technique. Just as with maple syrup today, boiling for different lengths could result in lighter, thinner syrups or darker, thicker ones with more pronounced caramelization. Some producers might have aimed for a specific color or consistency based on regional preference or intended use. Imagine arguing in the market over whether a batch of miel de maguey was boiled to the perfect amber hue. There's joke number one. This syrup is a little thin, clearly not boiled with the necessary ancient dedication. Historians debate the typical scale and standardization of miel de maguey production in the Aztec Empire. Was this primarily a large-scale craft, with specialized producers making significant quantities of syrup for trade in the major markets? Or was it more typically done at a household level wherever maguey was cultivated, with individual families boiling down their collected aguamiel, potentially leading to greater variation in consistency and quality? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand if you'd find factory-like syrup production or just home kitchen simmering sap. Boiling aguamiel into miel de maguey was a fundamental processing step, a way to turn the plant's daily gift into a concentrated form of sweetness that could travel and be stored. It required patience, control of the fire, and knowledge of when the syrup had reached the perfect point. Joke number two, you stir the thickening liquid. Looks almost ready. Just a few more hours of smelling like sweet, burnt plants. This versatile syrup was a cornerstone of the Aztec sweet palate, a key presence in the markets. Joke number three, you imagine trying to make syrup today without modern burners. Okay, just gotta keep this fire exactly at gentle simmer for unwind the rest of the afternoon. Maguey was a cornerstone of Aztec sweetness, providing fresh sap and rich syrup derived from that versatile plant, a truly Mesoamerican gift. But while maguey sweetness was essential and widely available, it wasn't the only natural sweetener available in the Aztec world before sugar arrived. Another ancient and highly valued source of sweetness came from the diligent, buzzing work of insects' honey in a surprising variety of forms. Honey was an important native sweetener in Mesoamerica, Used long before Europeans brought their familiar honeybees, Apis mellifera, the Aztec and other cultures in the region obtained honey from various native bee species. Crucially, one of the most important groups of honey producers were the stingless bees, belonging to the Meliponene tribe. Unlike the European honeybee, these native bees lack a functional sting, making their management and honey collection a very different and arguably safer process. Sensory details imagine the gentle buzz of stingless bees. Smaller and less aggressive than their European cousins, the honey produced by these native stingless bees often differs significantly in flavor, texture, and consistency from the honey we are most familiar with today, which comes predominantly from European honeybees. Depending on the species of bee and the flowers they visited for nectar, native honey could range in flavor from mild and floral to tangy, fruity, or even slightly sour. Its consistency often varied, sometimes being more liquid or less viscous than Apis honey, and it could range in color from pale yellow to dark brown. This provided a diverse palette of sweet flavors just from honey alone. Sensory details the visual of different colors and consistencies of honey, the distinct varied aromas, some floral, some fruity, some subtly tangy, the taste of these different complex honeys on your tongue. Traditional beekeeping methods were developed for these native stingless bees. Unlike the complex hive structures of European honeybees, meliponiculture, the keeping of stingless bees, often involved simpler approaches. Colonies might be kept in hollow logs. Pottery vessels specifically made as hives, sometimes shaped to mimic natural cavities, or even in stone cavities. Beekeepers would manage these hives, protecting them and collecting the honey periodically. While beekeeping provided a more reliable source, honey might also have been collected from wild nests of various bee species, wasps, or even ants known to store sweet substances, though this would likely have been a more opportunistic and less abundant source than managed hives. Honey was a highly valued commodity in the Aztec world. It was used as a sweetener in various foods and drinks. Much like maguey syrup, it was also valued for its medicinal properties, used to treat wounds or illnesses. And like other precious or potent substances, honey held cultural and ceremonial importance, used as offerings to the gods or included in ritual drinks. Its value meant it was traded in markets, sometimes over long distances, particularly finer or rarer varieties. A quirky tidbit about native honey involves specific, unusual flavors reported from different regions or bee species. Some historical accounts or modern studies of native honeys mention flavors described as spicy, citrusy, or even slightly chocolatey, reflecting the unique flora visited by the bees. Imagine tasting a honey that naturally had a hint of chili or cacao notes. There's joke number one. This honey tastes like flowers, man, and something spicy must be from the Curious Choices bee colony. Honey from various native bee species throughout Mesoamerica, particularly derived from domesticated stingless bees, Meliponini was a significant native sweetener in the Aztec Empire. This honey, often distinct in flavor and consistency from that of European honeybees, was used in food, drinks, medicine, and held cultural and ritual importance, making it a valuable commodity traded in markets. This is our mainstream historical fact, establishing honey's place as a key sweetener. Historians debate the relative importance and social accessibility of honey versus maguey products, specifically miel de maguey syrup, as the primary source of concentrated sweetness for the general population in the Aztec Empire. Was honey primarily an elite luxury, perhaps more highly valued due to its taste or perceived medicinal properties, and thus less available to the average household? Or was miel de maguey due to more widespread cultivation of the maguey plant, a more common and affordable sweetener for the non-elite population, even if honey was valued differently? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand which sweetener was truly the taste of everyday Aztec life for most people. Honey, with its diverse flavors and ancient value, added another distinct layer to the Aztec sweet palate alongside maguey products. It was a gift from the industrious native bees, a taste of the local flora concentrated into liquid gold or amber, or brown, depending on the variety. Joke number 2. You look at a pot of native honey, sweetness harvested by tiny, stingless heroes. These native honeys were a valued presence in the markets, traded alongside other goods from across the empire. Joke number 3. You imagine explaining stingless bees to someone used to European bees. Yeah, they make honey and they don't. I'd stab you. Maguey and honey were the heavy hitters in the Aztec sweet world before sugar, providing the main sources of concentrated sweetness in the form of syrups and liquid gold. But while Maggie's sweetness and honey were essential and widely available to varying degrees depending on status, the sweet palate of the Aztec Empire wasn't limited to just these two major players, particularly not for natural, unprocessed sweetness. The natural world around them offered other, perhaps less processed or abundant, but still vital sources of sweetness, primarily and most delightfully in the form of a wide variety of delicious native fruits. Long before sugarcane was introduced, people in Mesoamerica cultivated and gathered a diverse array of fruits, many of which were sweet and enjoyed as part of the regular diet. These fruits provided natural sugars, along with vitamins, flavors, and textures that added richness to their cuisine. The variety of fruits available depended on the region and the season, but trade networks like the one centering on Tlatelolco Market ensured a wider selection was often available in urban centers. You would find familiar-sounding fruits and others that might seem exotic today. Prickly pear cactus fruits, known as tuna in Spanish, were common and offered a juicy, sweet pulp. Various types of sapote fruits, like the large, creamy-fleshed mame sapote, provided rich, distinct sweetness. There were numerous native berries, small plums, and other tree fruits. Depending on the region, tropical fruits like papaya, guava, and pineapple, though pineapple's exact pre-Columbian distribution to the Aztec core is debated. It was present in Mesoamerica might also have been available through trade. Sensory details the visual of colorful fruit piles in the market. Vibrant reds, oranges, greens, purples. The smell of ripe, fragrant fruits. The feel of different textures, spiky, prickly pear, smooth-skinned sapote, soft berries. The taste of their diverse, natural sweetnesses. These fruits were primarily consumed fresh, enjoyed in season for their natural sweetness and refreshing qualities. Some fruits might also have been dried for preservation or processed in other ways, perhaps into pastes or drinks, further extending their availability and use. Beyond fruits, there might have been other, more minor or regionally specific sources of natural sweetness from plants that don't get as much historical attention as maguey or honey. This could include certain edible roots known to be sweet, or sweet saps collected from trees other than maguey, or even sweet parts of certain vegetables. Documentation on these more obscure sources is often scarce compared to the major ones, suggesting they played a less central role in the overall diet. But they likely contributed to the occasional or regional experience of sweetness. These fruits and other minor sources contributed to the overall sweet experience in the Aztec diet, complementing the more consistently available and often processed sweetness from maguey syrup and honey. They might have provided more occasional or seasonal bursts of sweetness, enjoyed when ripe and abundant. They highlight that sweetness in the Aztec world came directly from the natural bounty of the plants around them. A quirky tidbit about native fruits involves unusual varieties or preparation methods. Some accounts mention specific types of small berries or wild fruits that were gathered and prized for their intense sweetness, perhaps used in specific dishes or as snacks. There are also descriptions of preparing certain fruits by roasting or drying in ways that would concentrate their natural sugars, creating forms of sweetness that were more akin to confections, though still entirely plant-based. Imagine roasting a certain kind of root until it becomes surprisingly sweet and chewy. There's joke number 1. Tried to make a candy out of this weird berry. Tastes like victory, and also a little like dirt. Beyond the major sources of concentrated sweeteners like maguey products and honey, the ancient Aztec diet included natural sweetness from a wide variety of native fruits. both cultivated and wild, such as prickly pears, sapotes, and various berries, which were primarily consumed fresh and contributed significantly to the overall palette of sweet flavors available from the natural environment. This is our mainstream historical fact, confirming the importance of fruits. Scholars debate the quantitative contribution and primary role general flavor and nutrition versus providing a source of concentrated sweetness of native fruits in the overall Aztec sweet diet compared to processed sweeteners like maguey syrup and honey. While fruits were undoubtedly important for vitamins and flavor, how significant were they as a source of sheer sugar intake compared to consuming syrup or honey? Were certain fruits particularly prized and used almost like confections due to their high sugar content? Or were they primarily enjoyed as part of the broader diet? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand just how much of the Aztec sweet experience came from biting into a fresh fruit versus consuming processed sweeteners. Fruits and other minor sources added diversity, flavor, and natural sweetness to the Aztec diet, complementing the more concentrated sweeteners like maguey syrup and honey. They showcased the richness of their native food environment and provided sweetness directly from the plant itself. Joke number 2, you look at a prickly pear? Looks intimidating, but I'm told the inside is sweet. Worth the risk. These natural sweet gifts were a valued part of the Aztec palate, sold in the markets alongside other foods. Joke number 3, you bite into a delicious native fruit. Simple, natural sweetness. No boiling required. Take that, a syrup. Maguey gave the Aztec world sweet sap and syrup. Bees provided varied honeys, and fruits offered natural seasonal sweetness. But these forgotten sweeteners weren't just collected and processed. They were added to food and drink, shaping the unique flavors of Aztec cuisine, creating a sweet experience distinct from the sugar-centric palates that would emerge later. After European contact, native sweeteners, primarily miel de maguey syrup and honey, but also processed fruits like pastes or dried forms, were incorporated into a variety of dishes and, importantly, beverages. Unlike modern cuisine, where refined sugar often dominates desserts and sweet treats, in the Aztec world, sweetness often played a more integrated role, sometimes balancing other strong flavors. Drinks were a major category where sweeteners were used. Maize-based drinks, ranging from thin gruels to thicker porridges like atole, were staple beverages, consumed plain or flavored with fruits, chilies, or cacao. Sweeteners like maguey syrup or honey would be added to make these more palatable or desirable. You might be served a warm bowl of atole, its earthy maize flavor complemented by the distinct sweetness of maguey syrup or the floral notes of local honey. Fruit juices or mashed fruits mixed with water would also provide naturally sweet drinks. Sensory details the smell of warm, sweetened atole, the taste of a cool, sweet fruit drink, the texture of a thickened maize beverage with sweetener. Cacao drinks. The famous chocolate beverages were a complex and culturally significant category. Often, cacao drinks were consumed unsweetened or only lightly sweetened, their natural bitterness being a prized characteristic. However, when sweeteners were added, it was typically honey, less often maguey syrup, possibly due to taste preferences or the value associated with honey. Cacao drinks were frequently flavored with chilies, vanilla, or spices, resulting in complex combinations of bitter, spicy, and sweet tastes that are quite different from modern hot chocolate. Sweeteners were also used in solid foods, particularly those made from maize dough masa. Tamales, typically savory, could also have sweet fillings made from fruits, honey, or maguey syrup, sometimes mixed with beans or nuts. Maize porridges could be sweetened to create a more dessert-like dish. Imagine biting into a warm, soft tamale filled with a sweet, fruity mixture held together with maguey syrup. Sensory details the smell of steaming tamales, some with sweet aromas, the taste of sweet masa dough combined with other flavors. Fruits themselves, particularly those rich in natural sugars, could be processed into forms akin to simple confections. Fruit pastes, dried fruits, or combinations of fruits with honey or maguey syrup, perhaps mixed with seeds or even a touch of chili, likely served as occasional treats or forms of portable sweetness. While less documented than their use in drinks and maize dishes, native sweeteners might also have been used in some savory contexts, perhaps in sauces or glazes for certain meats, to balance the richness or spiciness, although this would not have been as prominent as in some other global cuisines. The overall profile of Aztec sweet dishes was different from modern desserts. They were often less intensely sweet, relying on the nuanced flavors of the native sweeteners. Sweetness was frequently combined with other strong flavors like chili, cacao, maize, and various herbs and spices, creating complex and sometimes surprising taste combinations that are unfamiliar in sugar-dominated palates. Modern aside, it's like how modern fusion cuisine experiments with sweet and savory, but the Aztec were doing it with very different ingredients and flavor balances. A quirky tidbit about Aztec sweet cuisine involves specific ceremonial dishes or drinks where sweetness played a key role, sometimes combined with less conventional ingredients. Some ritual drinks, involving fermented maize or other bases, might be sweetened with honey or maguey syrup and flavored with herbs or even psychoactive plants, highlighting the use of sweetness in contexts beyond just daily sustenance. Imagine a ritual drink that tasted sweet, earthy, potentially spicy, and transformative. There's joke number one. Tried the new ceremonial sweet drink. Tastes like honey, corn, and possibly seeing the future. One glass is probably enough. Native sweeteners like miel de maguey syrup and various honeys were utilized in ancient Aztec cuisine to sweeten a variety of foods and drinks, including staple maize-based porridges and tamales, fruit preparations, and beverages like atole and sometimes cacao drinks, creating a distinct sweet palate often combined with other strong native flavors. This is our mainstream historical fact, outlining the culinary uses. Scholars debate the level of complexity and creativity in Aztec sweet cuisine compared to simply using sweeteners in existing staple foods and drinks. Was there a significant culinary tradition dedicated to creating distinct dessert dishes or complex confections akin to those found in other ancient cultures? Or was the use of sweeteners primarily focused on enhancing or balancing the flavors of staple maize and cacao preparations, with sweet fruits serving as the main form of dedicated sweet treat? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand the extent of their sweet culinary innovation. Using these native sweeteners, Aztec cooks and beverage makers created a range of sweet and complex flavors, woven into the fabric of their daily diet and ritual life. Joke number two, you try a dish that's sweet and spicy. My taste buds are confused but intrigued. It was a sweet experience shaped by the resources of their land, a palate that would eventually face a dramatic shift. Joke number three, you imagine an Aztec chef trying refined sugar for the first time? Wow, this is aggressively sweet. What do you even do with this, the forgotten native sweeteners of the Aztec world, from maguey syrup to varied honeys and sweet fruits, played a role in daily meals, adding distinct flavors to porridges, tamales, and drinks. But food and drink in the Aztec world were not just for sustenance. They were deeply intertwined with the sacred, playing vital roles in rituals, ceremonies, and offerings to the gods. Sweet substances were often central to these practices, holding significant cultural and religious importance. In the Aztec worldview, offering food and drink to the deities was a fundamental way to show devotion, seek favor, and maintain the cosmic balance. Sweet substances were considered particularly suitable for offerings. Miel de maguey, syrup, and honey, with their precious and concentrated sweetness, were often presented to the gods on altars in temples or at ceremonial sites. Sweet fruits might also be included in these offerings. Why sweetness? Sweetness in many cultures is associated with pleasantness, desirability, and the goodness of life. In the Aztec context, sweet substances likely symbolized concepts like abundance, fertility, prosperity, and the life-giving bounty of nature. Offering sweetness was a way to give the gods something pleasing, a reflection of the richness of the world they provided. Imagine visiting a temple, the air thick with the smell of copal incense, and seeing bowls filled with glistening maguey syrup or rich honey placed before the idols of the deities. Sensory details the distinct smell of sweet offerings mingling with the smoky aroma of incense, the visual of colorful fruits, golden honey, or dark syrup on an altar, the solemn atmosphere of a ritual space. Sweet substances were also incorporated into ritual foods and drinks consumed during ceremonies. Pulque, the mildly alcoholic drink made from fermented aguamiel sap, was itself a culturally significant beverage, often consumed during rituals. It could be flavored or lightly sweetened with honey or miel de maguey for ceremonial purposes, perhaps making it more palatable or linking its consumption to the symbolic meaning of sweetness. Maize-based drinks and porridges used in rituals might also be sweetened with native sweeteners. Sweet tamales or other sweet maize preparations might be part of specific ritual meals shared among participants or offered to priests and officials during ceremonies. The act of consuming or offering these sweet foods was imbued with symbolic meaning related to the purpose of the ritual, whether it was a harvest festival, a rite of passage, or a dedication to a particular deity. The sources of the sweetness also held cultural significance. The maguey plant, from which aguamiel and miel de maguey were derived, was sacred to the goddess Mayahuel, the deity of agave, fertility, and sustenance. Offerings of maguey products were directly linked to this important goddess. Bees and honey might also have been associated with certain deities or concepts related to abundance and diligence. This connection between the source, the substance, and the divine reinforced the religious importance of these sweeteners, while any sweet substance could potentially be offered. Specific types or qualities of sweeteners might have been considered more appropriate or valuable for certain rituals or deities. Honey, often perceived as particularly pure and precious, might have been reserved for offerings to the highest-ranking gods or for the most important ceremonies. Reflecting its value, miel de maguey might be used more broadly or in rituals linked directly to Mayahuel. A quirky tidbit about sweet rituals involves unusual combinations or practices. Some accounts mention ritual beverages that combined sweetness with other strong flavors or even substances with psychoactive properties, consumed to achieve altered states of consciousness during ceremonies. Imagine a ritual drink sweetened with honey, flavored with chili, and also containing mushrooms or other plants used to communicate with the divine. There's joke number one. This ceremonial drink is complex, tastes like honey, fire, and confusing visual effects. Nailed the ritual. Sweet substances, particularly honey and miel de maguey syrup, held significant cultural and religious importance in the Aztec Empire. They were used as valued offerings to deities, incorporated into various ritual foods and drinks, including sweetened maize preparations and ceremonial beverages, and symbolized concepts central to the Aztec worldview such as abundance, fertility, prosperity, and the life-giving bounty of nature. This is our mainstream historical fact, covering the spiritual dimension of sweetness. Scholars debate the primary symbolic meaning of sweetness in Aztec ritual. Was it primarily linked to concepts of abundance and fertility, as suggested by its association with maguey and its role in sustaining life? Or was its main purpose to be pleasing and palatable, serving as a way to appease or gain favor from the gods? Contrasting with offerings of blood or other less pleasant substances, scholars also debate the relative frequency of sweet offerings compared to other types, such as incense copal, blood sacrifice, or offerings of maize and other staple foods. How prominent were sweet offerings within the overall system of ritual practice? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand the exact symbolic weight and prevalence of sweetness in Aztec religious life. The ritual importance of native sweeteners demonstrates that sweetness in the Aztec world was more than just a taste. It was a sacred element, linked to core concepts of life, abundance, and the relationship between humans and the divine. Joke number two. You imagine a deity receiving an offering. Ah, honey, my favorite. Much better than, well, you know. These sweet substances were woven into the fabric of Aztec beliefs and ceremonies. A taste of the sacred. Joke number 3. You try a ritual sweet tamale, definitely tastes sacred. And also, quite sweet. From adding sweetness to daily meals and playing a vital role in sacred rituals, native sweeteners were deeply woven into the fabric of Aztec life. But for most people in the capital, these sweeteners weren't produced at home. They were acquired at the heart of the empire's commerce. The bustling market of Tlatelolco, brought from different regions and sold alongside every other imaginable commodity. The Tlatelolco market, as we explored earlier, was the central hub, the place where goods from across the vast Aztec empire converged. This included the various forms of native sweetness. Sweeteners would arrive at the market carried by merchants and porters who had traveled from the regions where maguey was cultivated. Bees were kept, or specific fruits were grown or gathered. Miel de maguey, being a liquid, would be transported in sturdy ceramic pots or other containers, perhaps even in animal skins or gourds for larger volumes. Honey would arrive in ceramic pots, gourds, or sometimes still within sections of honeycomb, protected in baskets. Fruits would be carried carefully in woven baskets or nets to prevent bruising. Within the vast, organized chaos of Tlatelolco, there were designated sections for different types of goods. Sweeteners would likely be found within the broader food sections, perhaps in areas dedicated to processed foods or specialty items. You would find specific vendors specializing in certain types of sweetness. A vendor selling various grades of miel de maguey, another with different kinds of honey from different bee species or regions, and fruit sellers with their colorful displays. Sensory details, the visual of rows of pots or containers filled with different colored liquids and solids. The distinct, varied smells of different honeys and maguey syrups mingling in one area. The sounds of vendors calling out their prices and qualities. The sticky feel of tasting a sample. The sweeteners were sold in various forms and quantities. Miel de maguey syrup would typically be sold by volume or weight, poured from larger storage vessels into smaller containers brought by the buyer. Honey might also be sold by volume or weight, or sometimes, particularly with stingless bee honey, which stores it in wax pots or bags rather than large combs, sold in sections of the wax comb itself, providing a chewy, waxy, sweet treat. Fruits were sold by count, by weight using balances, or by volume in standard-sized baskets. Aguamiel, the fresh sap, might even be available for sale in the market, sold as a refreshing drink from large containers. The economic aspect of these transactions was central. Payment was primarily made using cacao beans, which served as a form of currency throughout the Aztec Empire, or through direct barter with other goods. The value of sweeteners would vary depending on their type, quality, origin. Some regional honeys or maguey syrups might be more prized, and availability, seasonal fluctuations for fruits. Challenges in harvesting. You would see buyers handing over small counts of cacao beans for a pot of honey, or exchanging baskets of maize for a volume of syrup. Various native sweeteners, including miel de maguey syrup, different varieties of honey, especially from stingless bees, and numerous sweet native fruits, were important traded commodities brought from different ecological regions of the Aztec Empire and sold in designated sections of major markets like Tlatelolco, with transactions commonly conducted using cacao beans as currency or through direct barter. This is our mainstream historical fact, covering the market dynamics of these sweet goods. A quirky tidbit about the market sale of sweeteners involves the packaging and display. Given that some native honeys were stored by bees in wax pots or bags rather than combs, vendors might sell these in their original small wax containers, perhaps bundled together, creating a unique form of pre-packaged sweetness. Imagine buying your honey in a little sealed wax packet. There's joke number 1. Yes, I'll take 3 bundles of the presumably bee-approved wax-potted honey. Please. Or perhaps honey was sold still dripping from a wild honeycomb, providing a very raw and natural product. Historians debate the relative market value and pricing structures for different native sweeteners sold in Aztec markets, particularly how the price of miel de maguey syrup compared consistently to that of different varieties or qualities of honey, or to specific prized sweet fruits. Was one significantly more expensive per unit of sweetness than the others? Did prices fluctuate significantly based on supply, Geech, droughts affecting maguey, bee colony health and demand? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand the precise economic hierarchy of native sweetness. Stepping into the section of Tlatelolco market where sweeteners were sold would have been a treat for the senses, a place filled with diverse sweet smells and the visual variety of their forms. It was the crucial point of distribution, making the sweet gifts of the land and the bees accessible to the urban population. Joke number 2. You look at the variety of honeys. So many options. Which one says subtly floral but also indicates I am a shrewd negotiator? The sale of these forgotten sweeteners highlights their importance in the Aztec economy and diet. They were commodities, traded alongside tools and textiles and feathers, valued for their taste and cultural significance. Joke number 3. You exchange cacao beans for some syrup. Ah, the taste of ancient commerce. The various native sweeteners of the Aztec world, miel de maguey, different honeys and sweet fruits, were brought to the vast Tlatelolco market, arriving in pots, baskets, and containers from across the empire. But who were the people standing amidst the organized chaos, calling out their wares, haggling over prices, bringing these forgotten flavors directly to the buyers? Let's imagine the vendors of sweetness. In the bustling, sectioned marketplace of Tlatelolco, vendors specializing in particular commodities would set up their stalls or areas. The sellers of sweeteners would be found in the food sections, their specific spot perhaps depending on the type of sweetener they offered. A row of stalls for miel de maguey, perhaps another for honey, and nearby, the vibrant displays of fruit sellers. You would see different types of vendors. Some might be producers themselves, bringing a surplus from their own maguey fields, beehives, or orchards to sell. Others were likely professional merchants who acquired sweeteners from producers in various regions and transported them to the city to sell in bulk or retail. These vendors would have specific knowledge about their products, the quality of their miel de maguey, the origin and flavor profile of their honey, the ripeness and type of their fruits. The vendors' interactions with buyers were lively and direct. They would call out to the passing crowds, advertising their goods. Fresh miel de maguey, sweetest syrup, honey from the lowlands taste the flowers. Their voices would add to the constant din of the market. They would display their goods to entice buyers, pots of glistening syrup, jars or combs of honey, colorful piles of fruit. Sensory details the constant cries of vendors calling out, the visual appeal of the sweetener displays, the mix of sweet smells emanating from their stalls, distinct from the chilies or cooking food nearby, the sounds of bartering, voices rising and falling. Buyers would approach, inspect the goods, and often sample them. A vendor might offer a small amount of syrup on a finger or a tiny piece of honeycomb, allowing the buyer to taste the sweetness and judge the quality before agreeing on a price. This sampling was crucial for products like honey, which varied greatly in flavor. Payment would be negotiated, often through barter, exchanging the sweetener for other goods like maize, beans, textiles, or tools, or using cacao beans. The widespread currency. A buyer would count out a small pile of cacao beans for a pot of miel de maguey, or a vendor might exchange honey for a stack of tortillas. Sensory details the feel of rough cacao beans being counted or exchanged, the sticky feeling of sampling syrup or honey. The Tlatelolco market featured specialized vendors who traded specific commodities within designated sections, including various native sweeteners like maguey product syrup, aguamiel, different types of honey, and fruits. These vendors interacted with buyers through vocal calls, visual displays, and offering samples, conducting transactions primarily through bartering or using cacao beans as currency. This is our mainstream historical fact, covering the role of the vendors. There were different levels of vendors, some with small, simple stalls, selling their own limited production, others with larger displays and more varied stock, clearly professional merchants trading in bulk. This reflects the layered nature of the Aztec economy. A quirky tidbit about sweetener vendors might involve specific, unusual sales techniques or specialized products. Some vendors might have sold sweeteners already incorporated into simple forms, like honey mixed with toasted seeds or nuts, creating basic energy bars or confections. Or perhaps a vendor specialized in a particularly rare or highly prized regional honey, known for its unique flavor or medicinal properties. Attracting specific buyers? Imagine a vendor whose specialty was honey, collected from bees that only visited a certain type of flower, giving their honey a bizarrely specific flavor. There's joke number one: try my honey. It tastes like slightly confused butterflies, very rare. Historians debate the social status and economic position of vendors specializing in different native sweeteners within the Aztec market system. Were vendors selling miel de maguey, a staple, seen as having a different status than those selling high quality, potentially more valuable, honey varieties? Was selling sweeteners a respected trade, or did its status vary depending on the scale of the business and the type of sweetener offered? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand where the sweetener sellers fit into the market's social hierarchy. Stepping into the sweetener section of the market, you meet the faces of the sweet trade, people who cultivated maguey, kept bees, or gathered fruits, bringing their sweet bounty to the city. Joke number two: you approach a honey vendor. Got anything that tastes like not being lost in a giant market anymore? Their interactions, their calls, their displays, their bartering, all were part of the vibrant economic and social fabric of Tlatelolco. Joke number three: you see a vendor expertly counting cacao beans. Yep, that's enough chocolate money for some honey. We've explored the vendors bringing native sweeteners to the bustling Tlatelolco market, offering miel de maguey, honey, and sweet fruits in various forms, highlighting their presence as traded goods. But to truly understand the place of these forgotten flavors, to appreciate their role in the Aztec palate before sugar arrived, we need to look beyond the market stalls and examine the broader context of Aztec cuisine and how sweetness fit into its overall balance of tastes. Aztec cuisine was not simple. It was complex, sophisticated, and utilized a wide range of flavors derived from the rich biodiversity of Mesoamerica and the extensive trade networks that brought ingredients from different ecological zones. While staples like maize, beans, and squash formed the base, the flavors added were anything but basic. Chilies provided heat and complex aromas, ranging from mild and fruity to intensely hot and smoky. Cacao, the source of chocolate, was often consumed unsweetened or only lightly sweetened, providing bitterness and deep, earthy notes that were highly valued. Herbs, spices, edible flowers, and ingredients from hunting, fishing, and insect gathering added savory, tangy, earthy, and sometimes surprising flavors. In this complex flavor landscape, native sweeteners like miel de maguey syrup and honey were not just isolated ingredients for making dedicated desserts. They were used to add sweetness, certainly, but also to balance or complement these other strong flavors, creating combinations that might seem unusual to palates accustomed to modern Western cuisine, where sweet is often strictly separated into dessert courses. Think about the interplay with chili. Chilies were fundamental to Aztec cooking, used in countless dishes and sauces. Sweeteners could be used to temper the heat of chilies, or to create a sweet and spicy contrast in sauces for meats or other foods. Imagine a rich, complex sauce where the heat of the chili is balanced by the earthy sweetness of maguey syrup, creating layers of flavor on your tongue. Sensory details the combined taste of initial sweetness followed by growing heat, or vice versa. The complex aroma of a sauce mixing spices, chili, and sweetener. Cacao drinks, as we touched on, were often bitter. Sweeteners. Typically, honey considered more complementary to cacao by some accounts, were used to balance this bitterness, making the drink more palatable to some tastes, or perhaps highlighting different aspects of the chocolate flavor. The combination of bitter cacao and sweet honey, sometimes with spicy chili or aromatic vanilla added, created complex, nuanced beverages that were a far cry from modern sugary hot chocolate. Sensory details the initial bitterness of the cacao followed by the sweetness, the interplay of bitter, sweet, and spicy flavors in a drink. Maize, the staple grain, provided an earthy, sometimes subtly sweet base flavor in porridges atole, tamales, tortillas, and other forms. Sweeteners were often added to atole to make a warm, nourishing, slightly sweet gruel. Sweet tamales had fillings where masa dough combined with honey, syrup, fruits, or other ingredients to create a distinct sweet flavor profile. Sweetness combined naturally with the earthy, comforting taste of corn. Beyond these major players, sweeteners could complement other savory flavors. Historical sources hint at the use of sweeteners in some savory preparations, perhaps glazes for cooked meats or additions to certain vegetable dishes, although documentation is less detailed than for drinks or maize foods. This suggests a willingness to combine sweet with savory, seeing them as complementary rather than opposing tastes. The overall impression is of a cuisine where sweetness was one important flavor among many, used skillfully to create balance and complexity. It wasn't necessarily about creating dishes that were overwhelmingly sweet like many modern desserts. It was about using sweetness as a seasoning, a counterpoint, an enhancer, weaving it into the fabric of meals and drinks alongside the heat of chili, the bitterness of cacao, and the earthiness of maize. Modern aside, it makes you appreciate the sophistication of their flavor combinations, using native ingredients to achieve complexity that rivals modern culinary techniques. A quirky tidbit about this flavor balance involves specific historical descriptions of dishes that showcase this complexity. Accounts from chroniclers sometimes mention sauces or prepared foods that specifically combined chili, cacao, and honey or syrup, highlighting this unique sweet, spicy, bitter dynamic that was characteristic of Aztec elite cuisine. Imagine a dish designed specifically to hit all those notes simultaneously. There's joke number one: this dish requires careful eating. It's sweet, then spicy, then bitter, then you need a drink. It's an adventure for your mouth. Aztec cuisine was characterized by a complex and skilled interplay of flavors, where native sweeteners like miel de maguey, syrup, and honey were used not only in dedicated sweet dishes and drinks, but also frequently to balance or complement the strong flavors of chili peppers. The natural bitterness of cacao, the earthiness of maize, and other savory ingredients. This is our mainstream historical fact, covering the blending of flavors. Scholars debate the extent to which the complex balancing of sweet, spicy, bitter, and savory flavors was a consistent characteristic across all levels of Aztec cuisine, or whether this sophisticated culinary philosophy was more a characteristic of elite cooking traditions. Did commoners primarily experience sweeteners mainly through simple forms like aguamiel or basic sweetened atole, while the elaborate combinations were reserved for the tables of the wealthy? Scholars also debate how the philosophy of combining these strong flavors, sweet and chili, differed significantly from other major Mesoamerican cultures in the region. This is our open scholarly debate phrase, trying to understand the reach and uniqueness of this flavor balance. Understanding how sweetness fit into the balance of Aztec tastes reveals a sophisticated culinary tradition that utilized its native sweeteners to create a range of complex and compelling flavors. Joke number two: you taste a traditional Aztec beverage. It's not soda and not pure juice. It's interesting. Sweet, bitter, maybe a little kick. It was a palate shaped by the ingredients available before the arrival of a single, powerful sweetener would change everything. Joke number three: you imagine a modern chef trying to recreate ancient Aztec dishes perfectly. Okay, add the honey, now add the chili. Now try to explain to the customer why it tastes like confusion and genius. The Aztec world had its own complex and fascinating palette of sweet flavors, derived from maguey syrup, varied honeys, fruits, and other native sources, used in diverse dishes and rituals. A sophisticated sweet landscape shaped by the plants and animals of Mesoamerica. But this ancient sweet world, with its distinct tastes and cultural meanings, was about to encounter a powerful, disruptive force, a newcomer from across the ocean that would fundamentally change the landscape of sweetness sugarcane. Sugarcane Saccharum officinarum was not native to the Americas. It originated somewhere far away, likely in Southeast Asia or New Guinea, and was spread by humans over thousands of years, traveling across Asia and into the Mediterranean world, eventually reaching Europe. From Europe, it began its journey across the Atlantic with the very first European voyages of exploration. Christopher Columbus, on his second voyage in 1493, brought sugarcane stalks from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean. From there, cultivation spread to other islands and eventually to the mainland of the Americas, including parts of Mesoamerica and South America, wherever the climate was suitable, warm, humid, and with enough water. Sugarcane, and the refined crystalline sugar produced from it, was introduced to the Americas by Europeans starting in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, bringing a new, intensely sweet, and eventually mass-produced sweetener that would profoundly change culinary landscapes, economies, and societies across the continents. This is our mainstream historical fact, marking the arrival of this transformative plant. Sugarcane offered several properties that made it profoundly disruptive to the existing sweet landscape. Firstly, its sweetness. Refined sugar, produced by processing cane juice, provided a much purer, more intensely sweet flavor than most native sweeteners. While maguey syrup and honey were sweet, they also carried other distinct flavors: earthy, floral, tangy. Sugar offered a clean, powerful sweetness that could dominate or easily be added to anything. Imagine tasting pure sugar crystals for the first time after being accustomed only to the nuanced sweetness of native sources. Sensory details the visual of sparkling sugar crystals, the overwhelming, intense taste of pure sweetness on your tongue. Lacking any other flavor notes, the granular texture of sugar. Secondly, sugarcane had the potential for mass production. While harvesting maguey sap was labor-intensive and honey collection was limited by bee colonies, sugarcane could be cultivated in large plantations in suitable climates. The process of extracting juice and boiling it down to produce sugar was, while also labor-intensive, tragically fueled by the brutal system of enslaved labor imposed by Europeans, capable of producing sugar in much larger quantities and eventually at a lower cost than some native sweeteners, particularly refined sugar, which was more transportable and storable. The initial encounter with sugar for the indigenous peoples of Mesoamerica, including the Aztec, came through the Spanish. The Spanish brought sugar as part of their provisions, and soon began cultivating it in areas they controlled. The sweet taste of sugar would have been completely new and perhaps astonishing. What might their reaction have been? Curiosity, delight at the intense sweetness. Perhaps initial caution. Imagine an Aztec person in the early 16th century being offered a small taste of this new, crystalline substance by a Spaniard. They are used to the earthy depth of maguey syrup, the floral complexity of native honey, the refreshing taste of fruit, and then this pure, powerful burst of sweetness. It would have been unlike anything they had experienced before, a potent new flavor entering their world. The arrival of sugar marked the beginning of a fundamental shift. While native sweeteners didn't disappear overnight, the introduction of sugarcane set in motion a process that would, over decades and centuries, lead to sugar becoming the dominant sweetener in the Americas, gradually overshadowing and displacing many of the traditional native sources in culinary use and economic importance. A quirky tidbit about the early introduction of sugar in the Americas involves the sometimes difficult initial attempts to cultivate it in new environments, and the rapid, brutal establishment of sugar plantations fueled by the exploitation of indigenous labor and, tragically, the transatlantic slave trade. The history of sugar in the Americas is inextricably linked to immense human suffering, a dark contrast to the simple sweetness it provided. Imagine the strange sight of sugarcane fields appearing in landscapes where only maize and maguey had grown, tended by people forced into labor. There's joke number one. They say this new plant makes things sweet. All it seems to require is back-breaking labor and a profound loss of human dignity. What a deal! Historians debate the speed and cultural factors that influenced the adoption of sugar among indigenous populations in Mesoamerica after its introduction. Did its intense sweetness lead to relatively rapid acceptance and integration into indigenous diets, at least where it was available through trade or labor, or was there initial resistance or slow integration, with native sweeteners remaining prominent for a significant period before sugar gradually began to displace them in various social and culinary contexts? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, understanding how quickly this new sweetener found its place. The arrival of sugarcane was a pivotal moment in the history of food and flavor in the Americas. It introduced a powerful new sweetener with the potential for mass production, a force that would eventually redefine sweetness and push the diverse native flavors into the background, making them, for many, forgotten. Joke number two. You imagine a historical cookbook being updated. Recipe for atole, add maguey syrup, honey, fruit, or just a giant scoop of this new white stuff. Seems simpler. This new, pure sweetness was a powerful addition to the culinary landscape. But its legacy is complex, intertwined with colonization and profound social change. Joke number three. You look at a pile of sugar crystals. So small, and yet capable of changing an entire continent's breakfast. Sugarcane arrived in the Americas, brought by Europeans, introducing a powerful new, crystalline sweetness that was previously unknown in Mesoamerica. Its introduction marked a turning point, the beginning of a profound change in the region's culinary landscape. Over time, the diverse native sweet flavors, so long dominated by maguey products, honeys, and fruits, began a slow process of being overshadowed and eclipsed by the sheer power and increasing availability of sugar. Native sweeteners didn't disappear immediately upon sugar's arrival. Maguey was still cultivated, native bees still produced honey, and fruits were still grown and gathered. But sugar possessed properties that allowed it to gradually gain dominance. Its intense, pure sweetness was a powerful new flavor experience, often stronger and less nuanced than the earthy sweetness of maguey syrup or the varied flavors of native honeys. This intense sweetness found favor and was easily integrated into various dishes and drinks, often replacing native sweeteners entirely. As sugarcane cultivation spread in suitable areas of the Americas, fueled by brutal labor systems, the potential for producing sugar in large quantities grew. While initially perhaps a novelty or a luxury even among Europeans in the Americas, sugar eventually became more abundant and, in some contexts, potentially more affordable than some native sweeteners. Particularly in urban centers or areas connected to European trade networks, this increasing availability and affordability, combined with its potent sweetness, led to sugar being adopted as the dominant sweetener in many culinary contexts. It was used to sweeten drinks, prepare confections, and incorporate it into dishes in ways that native sweeteners had been, over generations. Palates began to shift, becoming accustomed to and perhaps even preferring the intense, consistent sweetness of sugar over the more subtle or varied flavors of traditional sources. Following the introduction of sugarcane by Europeans, its increasing availability through cultivation and trade, and its intense, pure sweetness led to its gradual adoption as the dominant sweetener in many culinary contexts in Mesoamerica. This profoundly changed the flavor landscape, significantly displacing and overshadowing native sweeteners like maguey syrup and various honeys in everyday use. This is our mainstream historical fact, outlining the impact of sugar. The economic factors also contributed to the displacement. As sugar production became a major industry, controlled by Europeans and later others within the colonial system, it created new trade networks and economic incentives that favored sugar over local products. The infrastructure for cultivating, processing, and trading sugar grew, While the traditional systems for harvesting maguey sap or managing native bees might not have received the same support or investment, especially as native populations and their traditional practices were disrupted by colonization. While sugar became the dominant force, some native sweeteners persisted. Maguey products, particularly pulque, continued to be important in many rural areas. Maguey syrup and honey remained in use, often in more traditional or regional contexts, or for specific purposes where their unique flavors were still preferred or required for cultural ceremonial reasons. But their widespread prominence in urban markets and general cuisine lessened significantly compared to the growing ubiquity of sugar. The diverse native sweet landscape became increasingly monochrome, dominated by a single flavor. Imagine the shift happening over decades, seeing more and more crystalline sugar available in the markets. Perhaps initially expensive, then gradually becoming more common and cheaper. Seeing traditional recipes adapted to use sugar instead of syrup or honey. Hearing people develop a preference for the new, intense sweetness. The flavors of miel de maguey and native honeys, once central, being relegated to the background, perhaps only sought out for specific dishes or by those who held onto older traditions. Sensory details the visual of piles of white sugar crystals appearing alongside the pots of syrup and honey. The imagined taste of sugar replacing a familiar native sweetness in a dish. The smell of cooked sugar becoming more common than boiling sap. A quirky tidbit about this displacement involves specific native sweeteners that proved more resistant to being fully replaced. Some regional varieties of native honey, perhaps those with particularly unique or strong flavors, continued to be valued and sought after even as sugar became widespread, maintaining a niche market. Similarly, the unique process and cultural significance of pulque production ensured maguey remained important beyond just syrup. There might also be anecdotes about older generations lamenting the loss of the traditional flavors as sugar took over. Imagine someone saying, "This tamale is too sweet with this new sugar. It needs the earthy depth of good miel de maguey." There's joke number one. Everything tastes like sugar now. What happened to the subtle notes of boiled cactus water? Historians debate which specific native sweeteners maguey syrup, different honeys. Processed fruits were most quickly and severely impacted by the introduction and spread of sugar. Was maguey syrup, as a primary bulk sweetener, directly competing with sugar more than varied honeys? Were economic factors sugar's potential for lower cost or cultural factors, preference for sugar's pure taste and novelty, more significant in driving the displacement? Historians also question how complete the displacement was in different regions and social classes, and the extent to which native sweeteners persisted in rural or ceremonial contexts. This is our open scholarly debate phrase, exploring the nuances of how this change unfolded. Sugar's arrival redefined sweetness in the Americas, pushing the diverse native sources into the background, fundamentally changing the Aztec sweet palate and making many traditional sweeteners, for much of the world, truly forgotten. Joke number two. You look at a pot of traditional honey. Soon you'll be a historical artifact. Little pot. It was a culinary and cultural shift with lasting impacts. Joke number three. You imagine future generations trying traditional foods. This is sweet, but not sugar sweet. What is this strange flavor, Owen? We've explored the fascinating world of Aztec sweetness before sugar, from the spiky maguey giving sap and syrup, to the busy native bees producing varied honeys, and the abundance of naturally sweet fruits. We've seen how these forgotten sweeteners were harvested, processed, used in cuisine and ritual, and traded in the immense market of Tlatelolco, creating a complex sweet palette that often balanced chili, cacao, and other strong flavors. Then we saw the arrival of a powerful newcomer, sugarcane, and how its intense sweetness and eventual mass production gradually eclipsed these native sources. But even though they were overshadowed, the story of Aztec sweeteners didn't entirely vanish. Echoes of these forgotten flavors and the knowledge surrounding them remain, a quiet legacy that tells us much about the past. Even after sugar became widely available and affordable, some native sweeteners persisted, particularly in rural areas where maguey cultivation or traditional beekeeping continued, or for specific purposes where their unique flavors were still preferred. Maguey syrup, for instance, continued to be used, especially in regions where the plant was central to the economy and culture. Pulque, the fermented maguey drink, remains important in many parts of Mexico today. Some native honeys are still produced, sought out for their distinct tastes and perceived medicinal properties, and, of course, native fruits continue to be grown and enjoyed for their natural sweetness. The knowledge of harvesting maguey sap, boiling it into syrup, or traditional beekeeping methods for stingless bees didn't disappear entirely. Although it may have become less widespread or refined than it was in the Aztec period, this knowledge was often preserved in smaller communities, passed down through families or local traditions, continuing to connect people to the ancient ways of obtaining sweetness from the natural world. Studying these forgotten sweeteners, their production, use, and trade, gives us a deeper understanding of Aztec culture and economy. It highlights their ingenuity in utilizing the resources available in their environment to create a diverse and sophisticated food system. It shows the importance of plants like maguey, which provided far more than just sweetness. It reveals the complexity of their trade networks, bringing varied goods from across the empire to the capital. It gives us insight into their culinary preferences and their willingness to combine flavors in ways that differ from modern palates. And it underscores the intertwined nature of food, culture, religion, and economy in the Aztec world. The study of forgotten native sweeteners of the Aztec Empire, including maguey syrup, various honeys, and native fruits, reveals the ingenuity of Aztec foodways in utilizing local resources, the complexity of their flavor palette, balancing sweetness with chili, cacao, etc. The sophistication of their trade networks and the intertwined cultural, religious, and economic significance of sweet substances before their culinary landscape was transformed by the introduction and dominance of sugar. This is our mainstream historical fact, summarizing what the topic reveals. The story of these sweeteners also serves as a case study in the broader impacts of global ingredient exchange, like the Columbian Exchange, which saw foods and plants travel between the old and new worlds. While many foods from the Americas like maize, potatoes, tomatoes, chilies, cacao would profoundly change diets elsewhere. Ingredients from the old world like wheat, cattle, pigs, and sugarcane would similarly transform the culinary landscapes of the Americas. The displacement of native sweeteners by sugar is one example of this profound and often disruptive exchange. Even though sugar became dominant, the legacy of native sweeteners lives on, sometimes in unexpected ways. Modern culinary interest has led to renewed appreciation for ingredients like agave syrup, though often processed differently today than miel de maguey and unique native honeys. This modern interest echoes the value placed on these products in the ancient Aztec world. A quirky tidbit about the legacy involves traditional uses of miel de maguey, or native honey that continue today, often in specific regional dishes or traditional drinks, or even in medicine. You can still find miel de maguey being produced and used in parts of Mexico, a direct link back to the ancient Aztec source of sweetness. Although for many, it remains a niche product compared to sugar. Imagine tasting a traditional dish today that uses this ancient sweetener, a direct echo of a flavor enjoyed in Tenochtitlan centuries ago. There's joke number one. Tried some authentic miel de maguey. Tastes like history. And agave. Scholars debate the extent to which traditional knowledge about processing and using native sweeteners persisted within indigenous communities in Mexico after the arrival of sugar, and how much of the modern understanding of these sweeteners has been rediscovered through historical texts and archaeology versus continuously practiced oral traditions. Was there a continuous lineage of knowledge, or a significant break in later reconstruction? This is our open scholarly debate phrase, questioning the path of knowledge transmission across centuries. The story of the forgotten sweeteners of the Aztec markets before sugar arrived is a reminder that sweetness has a history. and that history is more complex and diverse than our modern sugar-dominated world might suggest. It tells us about ingenuity, resourcefulness, cultural values, and the profound ways that the introduction of new ingredients can reshape culinary landscapes and daily life. Joke number two. You look at a spoonful of sugar. You think you're the only game in town. You miss the ancient sweet party. Understanding these forgotten flavors gives us a richer picture of the Aztec world, showing us a different palate, different priorities, and a different relationship with sweetness than our own. Joke number three. You imagine explaining the history of Aztec sweeteners at a modern dessert shop. Yes, this is delicious, but have you considered a prickly pear and stingless bee honey combination? It's historically significant. And now, as our journey through the forgotten sweeteners of the Aztec markets comes to a close, you can let the vibrant images and distinct smells of Tlatelolco fade. The calls of ancient vendors are quieting. The aroma of boiling sap and varied honeys is softening. You can let go of the taste of maguey syrup and the sweetness of ancient fruits. All the history, the details, the forgotten flavors are settling down for the night. They are safe now, remembered, appreciated. Peace, quiet, a different kind of sweetness. Breathing easy, letting go, drifting. Sweet dreams.